Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us. Just a few quick things before we roll into it. If everyone can remain on mute during the presentation so there isn't any background noise, that would be perfect. You can choose to keep your cameras on or off. That's up to you. There's one button I'd like you all to avoid hitting. It's at the bottom of your screen, looks like a rectangle with an arrow in it. That's the Present Now button. Please do not hit that, as that will interrupt the presentation on the screen. If anybody has any technical issues, please put those into the chat feature, and I will do my best to help you through those. Just be aware most of the time the issues stem from your own Wi-Fi or internet connection. If you have any questions in the middle of the presentation, please put those into the chat and we can prompt David as needed. And if anyone has called in today, please send me an email at mfrey@pjhq.com so we can make sure you get your MSR credits for this morning as well. We are recording this, so this will be up on our YouTube channel later today if you ever need to refer back to it or share it with any of your coworkers. With that, I'll turn it over to our partner, Mr. David Cavosa.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. My name is David Cavosa. I'm the founder and CEO of CaddieNow, based here in Northern Virginia, but currently spread all throughout the country. We're in about 18 states now, supporting over 70 clubs now, and have over 7,000 caddies on our platform now as well. So the title of the presentation for today is the Caddie Renaissance Continues. It's a term that we've been using for the last couple of years, as we've seen a lot of activity in the caddy space. Lots of new companies entering the caddy management space with technology and different platforms, and a pretty interesting increase in caddy usage at clubs, and a pretty interesting increase in number of clubs with caddy programs. And that's really the genesis for this sort of annual report that we've pulled together over the last couple of years to survey the golf industry and really focus on caddy clubs and what they're seeing, what they're learning, what they're concerned about, and what we are seeing in the caddy space as well. So what you're going to see today, very briefly in this presentation, is a combination of a survey that was done by Golf Business Network, GBN, a couple of months ago, sent out to just over 1,000 clubs, most of them with caddy programs, some without, and received back a statistically significant response, we think. And then we also have a survey that we did of our 7,000 caddies on the CaddieNow platform. And there's some stats here at the end I wanted to share with the group on what we're seeing from the caddies on preferences. So I'll dive in here for a moment. And then again, if folks have questions, hold them to the end or type them into the chat box. First of all, I should also say that we'll send this presentation out. So for those of you who might be interested in taking screenshots along the way, obviously feel free, but we'll make sure that Matt has this presentation and can send it out to all attendees and non-attendees after the call. First,
David, real quick, I'm sorry, you're not sharing your screen at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So diving in, over 100 clubs responded, and just sort of to kind of paint the picture of how clubs are using caddies, how many rounds they're doing. This is just sort of a snapshot for everybody to see of the clubs that responded. How many total golf rounds per year are those clubs doing? So you're seeing sort of a very large mix of small clubs doing less than 5,000 rounds a year that are very exclusive. And then obviously clubs doing greater than 60,000 rounds a year, with pretty heavy focus there in the middle between 10,000 and 30,000 rounds, as would probably be expected by everybody. There's an estimate we see from our data of maybe 700 to 800 caddy programs active in the U.S. today. We could be off. by a factor of 10% maybe. But based on what we've seen in talking to clubs and doing our research with lots of partner organizations, somewhere between 700 and 800, we've seen numbers as high as 1,000. But if there are more than 700 or 800 caddy programs out there, then my guess is they're very small programs over and above that of, a handful of caddies for unique demand on a occasional use basis at a club. Really what it came down to it when we did this survey, asked lots of questions, but one of the things we focused on were what are the challenges that these clubs are facing. And there were several multiple choice options for them to choose from. And then they could also type in notes on things that weren't on the multiple choice list that they wanted to note. So you'll see down on the bottom right-hand side of this chart, the other, please specify. So you see some clubs saying caddy housing shortage, which is an issue we saw a couple places. But really what it came down to, what are the big challenges that clubs are worrying about regarding their caddy program? It came down to supply and demand, big surprise, and quality and risk. So my guess is that won't be surprising for most of you on this call. There are obviously other areas of cost of caddies. COVID came up and we've got some questions around that. But for the most part, you can see it's, hey, quality of the caddies. How do we increase demand or manage demand for our caddy program? The supply, which we'll talk about, and then of course the risk to clubs. So sort of diving in here for a moment, right up front to supply and demand. We'll talk about some of the keys to creating demand for caddy services at the club. But before we do that, let's look at what the clubs are saying. First of all, supply. What's the number of caddies in your yard was basically the question that was asked. And you'll see again a pretty broad scope of answers from less than 20 all the way up to maybe we've got greater than 80% or 80 caddies in our yard for about 10% of the respondents. I'll let you look at the numbers here yourself rather than me reading through each of them. But I'd say what's statistically significant are roughly 35% of the respondents use caddies for 50 or more percent of their rounds. So we look for trends and numbers. That's one that we could pull out of this data. And then roughly 20% of the clubs use caddies for less than 10% of their rounds, which sounds like very much a occasional use basis, perhaps just in the summertime and just when members have a need. There's probably no policies in place to require caddies. So that brings us into policies. We ask clubs, what sort of policies do you have in place, if any, to use caddies at your club? And, you'll see, again, the numbers here, mostly mandatory with guests. That's a number we see, that's a policy we see in place at clubs. Almost every caddy program that I talk to doesn't say 100% here. It says 60%, but almost every caddy program we speak to says caddies are mandatory with unaccompanied guest play. If you've got an unaccompanied group out there, it's basically part of the cost of playing at that club, and it's used by most clubs to build the backbone of demand at the club for the caddy program. So at least a 4 caddy with the group if you have 4 caddies. And then you can see some of the other policies noted in the top right-hand side, if available before 3 p.m., weekends before 10 a.m. So there's a little bit more data there, more detailed anecdotal data on what folks are saying. And again, if you can't read it because it's too small on the screen, apologies, but we will send this out so you can see it firsthand. So supply of caddies. Basically, what we tried to ask the clubs this year, we've already talked about how many caddies do you have in your pool. We then said, did you have a hard time recruiting caddies this year? This was 2021 focused. And I was surprised by this answer. 37% said yes, 63% said no. I actually expected the yeses to be much higher. I expected it to be a 60-40 split the opposite way, and was surprised when I saw what I did here. But my guess is that's because a lot of these caddy programs, the 100+ clubs that responded, have had long-time caddy programs and have already a healthy connection with their local high schools and colleges and youth organizations and know how to tap into those veins to get caddies. But there's still roughly 40% that are saying it's hard. Maybe it was because of COVID, or maybe it's because of the obviously global change in the labor market that we're seeing across the country. This is something we wrestle with every day at CaddieNow. We have a full-time recruiter that we've hired on our staff, and all she does all day, every day, 365 days a year is recruit caddies. And they use lots of means, social media, in person, knocking on doors at high schools and colleges, partnering with local youth organizations. We've got some great use of technology and Facebook where we do some targeting. We're able to draw circles around certain facilities and certain regions, and any caddy that has certain or any individual on those platforms that has certain interests, we can trigger them an ad for caddying at a specific club or in a specific group of clubs in a region. We found lots of great success there. One of the other big things we find success on to share with the group is just referral bonuses. Giving your existing caddies a referral bonus to recommend new caddies coming in. If you have the budget for that, which we always do ourselves, it goes a long way to getting the right type of candidates in the door. One of the other big issues we saw up front, aside from supply and demand, was quality, of course. I think that was the largest response on the list, was quality of the caddies. Lots of caddy committees and boards saying, of course, hey, the quality needs to get better. If the quality of the caddy pool gets better, then more people can take caddies and we'll feel more comfortable implementing policies here at the club. But you're going to get that chicken and the egg problem, as I'm sure many of you wrestle with, which is, how do I get the quality up if there isn't enough demand to keep all these caddies busy? And then, of course, the committees and the membership saying, well, we're not going to put policies in place until the quality is better. So it's definitely a chicken and the egg. How do you train your caddies? You all can see the statistics and the results here at a high level. I'm surprised to see no training. The third-party training, obviously using companies like maybe CaddieNow, Club Up, Caddy Master, 4C Caddies. There's several players out there that will help you with that. Some organizations might use a local youth charitable organization. I think Evans, the scholarship fund, is now training caddies in the summertime as well. Perhaps some of the organizations in the Met will be doing that as well. Maybe even J. Wood Platt or the We Met Fund. I'm not sure what they're planning for the coming years, but that's one opportunity if clubs are looking to get more training without doing it themselves. I think some of these youth charitable organizations are starting to look at that as an option. We asked some questions around how do you manage your caddy program today, and what are the costs? Who manages your program? So you'll see some of those high-level statistics here. Total costs or salaries for managing a caddy program. And again, you're seeing a wide range of responses. There was really no, common number here where everybody was spending $30,000 to $40,000 on a caddy manager. You see a pretty wide swath of whether that's one caddy manager, whether some clubs probably have two and have an assistant caddy manager. Some clubs are probably using their director of outside operations to do this. Some clubs might be using an assistant professional on staff, and just they're allocating a portion of that staff member's salary or budget to this caddy management cost. But we saw a pretty wide range here. Roughly 30% of the clubs spend less than $20,000 a year on their caddy management costs, we'll say, which I thought was pretty impressive. And then you've got 15% of the clubs that responded saying they spend over $80,000 a year for their caddy management costs. And I'm guessing that's where they've had a solid long-time caddy manager on property that's been severe tenure at the club, or perhaps they have two or three staff members in that role. Really all comes down to number of caddies in your pool, how often they're available. Are they available 7 days a week or 5 or 6 days a week? And then what policies you have in place. And then that's going to dictate really how much staffing you need to support a club. We tend to tell a club, if they ask us, hey, Dave, do we need a caddy manager or not? I'm going to go to, first and foremost, how many caddy rounds are you doing a year? If you're doing less than 1,000 caddy rounds a year, especially when you're using CaddieNow technology as a partner, I'm going to tell the club you probably don't need a caddy manager per se. One of your assistants or one of your your director of outside operations can handle the program if it's less than 1,000 rounds a year. As soon as you get over 1,000 rounds a year with caddies, a round obviously being a bag, that's when you're getting to a point where it would be helpful to have somebody dedicated to the caddy program, monitoring quality, constantly recruiting and bringing caddies in, training them, and then checking in with the members as activity happens throughout the season to see how they're doing. Again, kind of reinforcing what we were just talking about on Caddy program management side. How many staff hours are you spending a week on your Caddy program? Obviously, in season is going to be 40 plus. Sometimes out of season, on the shoulder season, you're spending a little bit less time. But in the Caddy space, as many of you know, the spring is probably the busiest time in the role of a Caddy manager, and that it's constant recruiting and training to get ready for the kickoff of the season. Most of the clubs here, 60+%, use that traditional Caddy manager role. I've seen a lot of clubs get away from the term Caddy master. Obviously, it has some other meanings to it. So I've seen a lot of clubs move to Caddy manager. I've seen clubs move to, again, just director of outside operations. We tend to use the term Caddy service manager, CSM, as well. Interesting. We threw out a question. We're interested to see if clubs use their caddies for other needs, other service needs at the club, and didn't know what to expect, and was interested to get back what you're seeing here, which is the clubs are using the caddies for some other miscellaneous jobs. Obviously, some clubs have said absolutely not. Caddies are here to caddy, and that's it, in order to maintain their independent contractor status. We really don't want them doing anything else. And then obviously some clubs have said, no, if the caddies are here, we have them do miscellaneous other jobs. Maybe they're paying the caddies for that time. Maybe they're not. Maybe that's part of what the caddies are being used as a requirement to get playing privileges at the club. We didn't get into that level of detail, but interesting that, our view at CaddieNow is, especially when we are helping a club protect and manage the caddy program, we bring all the caddies on as independent contractors to CaddieNow generally. They sign our waiver, they sign our agreement. And then if the club does want to use that caddy pool for other jobs, then we absolutely support it, and we'll continue to protect the club on that. But we just put them out as separate jobs with a separate fee. So the caddies will pick that up as another gig, right? So they're caddying, let's just say they're getting 50 for a 4 to 5 hour caddy loop. If the course says, hey, I'd like a caddy to come on and work for 4 hours cleaning the range at the end of the day, or helping us clean carts on a busy day, we put that out on the platform as another job, and the caddy picks it up with a specific hour range and a specific price point. And when they accept that job, they're accepting that gig as if they were an independent contractor. So it works well. And I'll be happy to take questions, and we can talk more about any of these at the end of the presentation. A couple questions on COVID, which I thought you all might be interested in seeing. Again, I was surprised to see this response. In all the conversations we have with clubs, we hear COVID over and over again, with impact on whether it be supply, demand for caddies, members uncomfortable taking caddies, changing of policies at clubs, and then of course, recruiting caddies. When we said, did COVID have an impact on your caddy program in 2021? Really surprised to see that almost 60% of the clubs said no impact on their caddy program. That was very surprising to me, given real world examples that we just, in talking with clubs, we see a tremendous impact. But perhaps we're only talking to the folks that are having an impact in COVID, and that's why they're talking to us. But interesting statistics. I'll let you all draw your own conclusions from it. COVID vaccines. Now, granted, this data is now 4 months old, 5 months old. We did this survey, I think, back in the October timeframe. But we just asked the question of, are your staff going to be required by the club to have the vaccine? And then are your caddies going to be required to have the vaccine? And it was almost identical responses to both those questions, with obviously the exception that in the caddy space, less clubs said that they were going to require their caddies to have the vaccine than requiring their staff to have the vaccine. So I thought that was an interesting response. Probably the nature of the caddy pool generally at these clubs, probably more people less interested in taking of the vaccine, and the clubs perhaps felt they had less control over putting a mandate like that on the caddies than they did on the paid employment staff. Those were all valid points, but we didn't ask those second level questions. Something we may look at going into 2022 if this is still an issue. The sort of final section of the survey here is talking about risks to the club. That came up over and over again as one of the biggest concerns is the risk of having a caddy program for multiple reasons. A lot of data here. Again, might be too small for some of you to see. You'll be able to get this data in your hands later today and look at it yourself. But kind of the key takeaways are clubs are concerned about the risk associated with their caddy program, period, end of story. What's some of the additional data behind it? I think a lot of the clubs are looking at the legislation and some of the state activities going on, East Coast, West Coast, for the most part, not happening so much in the central part of the country around independent contractor classification. Are caddies really truly independent contractors when the club tells them what time to show up, recruits them, trains them, disciplines them, tells them what to wear? In some states, still very much not an issue because of the way the states look at independent contractor versus employment status. But in other states, and if you're on the East Coast, on the West Coast, you probably know this issue extremely well, between lots of lawsuits that have happened recently and lots of legislation that's currently underway or being considered, becoming a bigger issue. Very much targeted, as many of you probably know, at Uber and Lyft and DoorDash as to whether those people are independent contractors or employees of those companies. But in the process, it's grabbing some of our issues like caddies and pulling them into that conversation and saying, okay, well, are these guys really independent contractors or employees? I will tell you, in most states that we operate in, as long as the caddies are signing our IC agreement, our waivers, and the club is working with us to use the technology platform the right way, we can help reinforce that those caddies are, in fact, independent contractors, and we're willing to take the risk on for the club. And I believe there are some other companies that are willing to do that as well, not just CaddieNow. That's the key distinction. Is I really encourage clubs to look at this and say, we can partner with somebody like a CaddieNow, modernize our program a little bit, get help with the recruiting and training, and then also take the risk of the caddy program off the plate of the club and the member and put it in the hands of CaddieNow that knows how to do this. So sort of coming down the home stretch here, and then we'll pause for questions. Kind of shifting from the survey we did of the top 1,000 clubs in the country, and now moving to the survey that we've just done over the last 2 years of our caddy population, and ask them some basic questions we'll share with the group. So number one was basically, what's the highest level of education that we see in our caddy pool? You see the pie chart on the top right side here. 66.7% of the caddies in our pool have a college education, college graduate, which we thought was outstanding to see that level of school progress in our caddy population. Another 13% are currently in college, and then you've got 14% high school student, and another couple percentage points each of master's education or current masters, and then high school students. That will start to shift as we look at these numbers over the next couple of years, as we have partnered with a lot more youth organizations where the caddies are 100% high school students, 14 to 18-year-olds. So the gray part of that chart, my estimation is, as we look at this number next year, the gray part will start to get bigger and bigger now that we're partnered with several youth orgs. What's the level of competitive golf experience? We thought that was interesting as well, where you've got some golfers, some of the caddies, 40%, a good portion of them are just recreational golfers. And then you've got 30% or so that are high school or college golf team, and 9.5% that played professionally in some way, shape, or form. I think if you would look at the makeup of the caddy pool at some of the other third-party caddy organizations, you might see a little bit of a different makeup than what you see with CaddieNow, because of the way that we manage our programs, because of the way we recruit and where we recruit for caddies, and also just adding a little bit of technology to the program changes the profile of the type of caddy that wants to caddy at your club. So you need a mix. You need those college guys and those high school kids that want to caddy on the weekends and summers, and then you need your mainstay, traditional caddies that are there all day, every day, willing to work Monday through Friday, on and off season. Good mix is the answer there. Desired work schedule. I think if I were to take anything away, try to find a thread here, that what we've seen is that, so we asked the caddies, what's the number of hours you'd like to work a week, ideally? So on our platform, the caddies are saying they want to work somewhere between, if you look at the green and the dark orange, they're saying they want to work 5 to 30 hours a week as a caddy. So what that tells me is 1 to 5 or 6 loops a week as a caddy, which tells me they don't want to work every day. They have it as a side hustle, 1 or 2 loops a week. And then some of these guys still want to have 2 days a week off themselves so that they can go do something else. Really don't want to be there 7 days a week, 40 plus hours a week. You still have those guys. We still have the light orange that want to work 30 plus hours a week, but it's a smaller fraction of the pool. And then when do you want to schedule your loops? I think the smallest number in this survey, which is less than 10%, less than 5, is same day. And that tells me there's a big shift. And when I was caddying as a kid, where you just showed up day of and you found out if you were getting out at all, to the analysis here, which is saying most of these guys want to schedule 3 to 7 days out if they have the choice, so that they can set their schedule and then they can have their life separate from their caddying gig. I think obviously that's a little bit of a change for probably many of you on this call as to how you might have grown up caddying and how you may have run your program, and where the transition is with today's population of high school and college kids, and for that matter, even part-time adult caddies. And then last but not least, just threw in a question for everybody to look at around use of technology. CaddieNow obviously has a big piece of our business is our technology platform. You've got Club Up out there that has a great technology platform as well to manage caddies. And then you have several other organizations just starting up in this space as well. Just asking clubs, do you use technology at all for your caddy program? Common responses, texting and emailing. And that didn't surprise us at all. A lot of what we see when we talk to clubs is that they are still texting their caddies to tell them when they have a loop. We see some clubs that have used sort of Google Sheets, things of that nature. And caddies will sort of log into a Google website and see what their schedule is for the next day. And then obviously some clubs are using a T-sheet module that is present probably in a company like 4Ts, which has a caddy management tool in their existing T-sheet. So lots of different views of that. Obviously, we're a bit biased at CaddieNow, thinking that we have built a platform to do exactly this, help clubs more efficiently manage their caddy programs, save time, and now integrate with their T-sheets as well. So for those of you who have Jonas, 4Ts, Club Essentials, Members First, North Star, Agilicis, CaddieNow integrates with all of those. And so do some of our competitors. They integrate with those T-sheets as well. So it's a great way to avoid double data entry. And it's probably, I think, within the next couple of years, probably every club that's using a platform like ours or some of our competitors will be using a T-sheet integration, is my prediction. So with that, I will pause the one-way conversation here with everybody. Hopefully you found that information useful. It took us about 25 minutes to get through it, a little bit longer than I expected. But it's exciting times for us. We love seeing this caddy renaissance underway. We love seeing all these clubs reevaluate the way they run their caddy program. Lots of new caddy programs starting up. I've got 2 phone calls today with clubs that want to start caddy programs, primarily youth caddy programs, which we love to see. And again, you'll see this data in your hands here, hopefully later today from Matt. And I'd love to take any questions from the group, if there are any, either via chat or if they want to raise their hand. Matt, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. Thanks, David. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Hey, Matt, David, it's Dave McNabb from Applebrook. David, I don't know what you do or don't know about Applebrook, so I'll just give you a little bit of background. We're a walking-only caddy club. We require caddies until 3 p.m. in the afternoons, all days. Some of our younger population can carry at any time. We're restricted to a different time, but we mainly employ full-time caddies that are that's their main gig. We do have some school teachers and the like. the purpose that we're on this call today is really to just kind of get your professional opinion, and get some input as to the liability with regards to, us running our own caddy program with independent contractors. I know it's a big point of conversation, like you mentioned, mainly East and West Coast, over the course of the last few years. I've had some email conversations back and forth with Gene. We just haven't connected yet on Club Up. But we're kind of in the research phase right now.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about what you see or have seen as far as what the liability is that exists, and is it a serious concern if your caddies are just mainly coming to caddy? How do you negotiate the training aspect? Some of those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. A great question, Dave. The answer to your question is a very long answer, where we sort of get into a point by point with you of, okay, how do you handle this? Do you make your caddies do that? What are the caddies sign, if anything? What control do they have? What control don't they have? Do they wear a uniform? So we sort of sit down with a club and go point by point through about 15 or 20 questions. How do you do this? How do you do this? How do you do this? And then based on your answers to those questions, we'll then just give you, an assessment back, a free assessment back to say, hey, you're in Pennsylvania. You're doing these things. You should probably be concerned. If you wanted to tweak these 2 items, you'd probably put yourself in a much lower risk category based on that. And then, of course, I'm going to say, and then here's how we can help you do that as well. And then, of course, take the risk completely off your plate. If you were telling me, hey, Dave, I'm in Texas, and here's what I'm doing, my answer probably is going to be to you at the end of the day, listen, there's really no aggressive look in the state of Texas at misclassification of independent contractors, especially caddies. And I can give you some small data points on, if you want to just get a little bit safer, do this, and you'll be fine. You're in Texas. Where we see the most activist lawyers and legislators is obviously New York, New Jersey, California, starting to be in Illinois. Pennsylvania, I haven't seen as much activity in Pennsylvania as I've seen in other states, but it's still, obviously, you've got neighbors that are paying close attention to this, so it's inevitable that it's going to come your way. So I'm not trying to dodge your question. I'm trying to say it's a much longer conversation that if the group wants, we can dive into it live with everybody on the phone, and if not, you and I can take it offline and talk about it to a greater extent.
Yeah, I think that probably makes the most sense. Have a conversation offline, unless a bunch of people have that same interest. But we could probably go down a rabbit hole and be on this call till tomorrow at this time if we did that.
Yeah, and I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV, sort of thing. Where
sure.
Over the last 7 years, I've had to become an expert on labor law, and then not just labor law, but how does the state treat independent contractors versus how does federal treat independent contractors? How does the IRS look at it? How does the Department of Labor look at it versus the state? And then you've got state of New Jersey where you've got activity going on right now there to reinforce the independent contractor status of caddies, where the governor didn't sign that bill 3 weeks ago. So there's lots of activity. Sometimes it's targeted at the state level, and then there's big picture stuff. If you said the word before, employ. When I hear that, I'm hearing, okay, you employ the caddies and they're paid as employees. If you are doing that, if I heard that correctly, then you're safe. They're employees. Now they're under your workers' comp policy. They're covered and you're covered. But obviously that's a very expensive approach to doing things. So if they're independent contractors, that's when the gray area starts to come into play. And that's where we should talk.
Yeah, I probably just threw that word out there without really even thinking about it. We don't pay our caddies as employees. We treat them as independent contractors. So, but I don't play a lawyer on TV. I play a golf pro on TV. So I'm even less inclined to have expertise in this area than you are. So, shit, I forgot where I was going after my attempt at humor there.
Happens to the best of us. I'll follow up with you, Dave. I think I have your contact information.
Okay.
And I'll just say you've already mentioned Club Up, which is one of our biggest competitors in the space. They know what they're doing in this space as well. They've got a good technology platform and they know how to do this. So
Yeah,
there's not just one approach here. You've got multiple ways to skin this cat.
sure. I know the question I was going to ask is, of these lawsuits and things that you're seeing, is it the caddies going to lawyers and the states and starting these lawsuits, or is it the states or lawyers actively seeking out these individuals, or is it a little bit of both?
So again, completely anecdotal is all I can share, which is that what we're seeing is it's the lawyers going to the caddies, and when they see smoke, they start going after it, and they can create a bigger issue because once one settlement happens in a state, the lawyers get wind of that, and then they start looking for plaintiffs to go after other clubs in the area.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions from the group, if any?
Joe Cook just asked, does any of your research show clubs abandoning caddy programs?
Yeah, so I didn't get statistical data on that, Joe. Did you get rid of your caddy program? We saw some anecdotal evidence on that where people in the comments said, with everything going on with COVID, we've abandoned the caddy program for now. So we've seen COVID as the excuse. I haven't seen any clubs use the legal issues as an excuse for getting rid of their caddy program, risk or legal. But obviously, there's definitely a drop in caddy usage over the last 2 years at many clubs who started to allow pull carts. That's one of the big things we've seen is they allowed pull carts during COVID. And now the golf professionals at those clubs and the caddy committees are trying to push back on that and push pull carts back out of the club usage and get caddy usage back in. And they're fighting that battle now. And then that's where quality and risk comes in, because now these members are going, no, I like using my pull cart. Let's get rid of the caddy program, or let's not make it mandatory anymore. And when that happens, many of you know that's what is that will start to kill your caddy program over time. It's a good question. Yeah.
Toby, if you had a question, it didn't come through completely. So if you want to unmute yourself, you're more than welcome to as well.
No, I did not have a question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. David, Rick from Lancaster asked if you would mind giving some rough numbers as to the expense associated with working with a third-party administrator, and how would a club use CaddieNow if they don't currently have a tee time platform?
Yeah, so you're going to see a pretty wide range of costs for using a third-party provider. What I'll say is, if all you want is technology, it's just like, hey, we don't need insurance, we don't need indemnification, we don't need your help recruiting, training caddies, engaging them. All we want is a technology platform to make it a little bit more efficient. Then you're talking $3,000 to $6,000 a year for the software. And then if the caddies are being paid via the platform, then there's additional costs, a couple dollars a bag for paying caddies. But again, if you said, hey, we're going to keep paying them in cash, all we want is technology, you're talking like a $3,000 to $6,000 a year cost for that software. As soon as you bring into play, hey, we do want help with managing and recruiting caddies. We do want the indemnification and the insurance. With CaddieNow, you're talking about a couple more dollars per bag. That's where we take our additional service fees, is through the bag fee. So now you're talking maybe $3 to $5 a bag. The golfer's basically paying that, and then the annual software fee to the club. And then I've seen some of our, kind of long established competitors. It can cost $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 a year to help a club manage their caddy program. But generally that means they're putting somebody on property. And that's a reason for the additional cost, is they're putting a full-time caddy manager on property as well. So Rick, it can range, and it depends on what you want, from technology only, technology and payment, technology plus recruiting and training support, technology plus everything, including a caddy manager, and you're going to get that range of costs. Hopefully that answers your question. Oh, and then I see there's a second part to it. Sorry, I should have brought some water with me. how would a club use CaddieNow if they do not currently use the tea time platform? Yeah. So we actually have several clubs that don't have tea times that use our platform. I'm sure Club Up does as well. There's lots of ways around that. Number one being clubs, if they have an idea of when members tend to play or when caddy usage tends to be the greatest, they can enter those bookings in advance in the platform. And doesn't have to be tied to a specific member or a specific tea time. Generally, you'll say, hey, I need 5 or 10 caddies around the 8 o'clock time, 7:30 time, 7 a.m. time. And then when the caddies arrive, whoever's on site can assign them to the right groups and then make adjustments in our system if they went out at 7:40 instead of 7:30. That stuff is pretty easy when there's no tea time policy in place. The other idea we use is what we call our virtual caddy shack or our virtual check-in function. And it's to help avoid that independent contractor issue of waiting on property and violating wage and hour, which is an issue with traditional programs, is that we draw a radius around the property of a couple miles. And then all the caddies have to do is be within that radius, within that net, and they can virtually check in and get on the tee sheet, get on the radar screen of your caddy manager to say, hey, I'm here. I'm available. I'm at Starbucks, 5 minutes away. I'm at home 10 minutes away, but I'm within the radius. And let me know if you need me. And then your caddy manager has a list of all of the caddies that are available, checked in nearby. And he can then slot in whoever's from that list available, sends them a notice immediately. Hey, we need you on the tee in 10 minutes. And they can come on. So if you can't do advanced scheduling, you have no idea when you're going to need caddies or whom, that's what I'd recommend. If you have some clue that, hey, generally we need 10 caddies between 7 and 8 a.m. on Saturday, then you just create those requests in advance and then you figure it out on site the day of and move some things around using our system.
Any other questions from the group?
Hey, David. This is Sean Matthews from Squires Golf Club, and we have a caddy program here too. But I wanted to ask you, we don't have tee times either. Let's say on a given day you wanted 10 guys to show up, but just guessing on who's coming, and what happens if you only need 8? 8 actually go out. How do those other 2 guys get paid, or do they get paid? How does that work?
Yeah. So generally, I'm going to give you the legal answer here, which is that if they show up and they wait and they don't get any work and then leave, they should be paid for that wait time in a perfect scenario to make everybody safe.
Would that be, a full bag rate that we have to pay for, or would that be just, an hourly wage, if you will?
What I would look at is sort of an hourly wage for that wait time, where if the minimum wage there is, say, $12 an hour and they waited an hour and a half, 2 hours, I'm going to pay them $24 and say, thanks for your wait time. Sorry, we'll get you out first tomorrow if you come again. Now, nobody does that, or almost nobody does that, I would say. They just tell the caddy, hey, sorry, that's the price of admission. We'll get you out first tomorrow. Yeah. We don't want to pay you anything. So if a club asks me, how do I do it to make sure I have zero exposure? That's what I would do.
Okay. I guess another follow-up, can you run your caddy yard and just use, your guys traditionally and then reach out to CaddieNow when you need those extra loops? Or does it have to be all encompassing? If you're going to CaddieNow, every loop has to run through you guys?
Yeah, I'd love for the answer to be yes to that. The reality is we would probably fail if we did that for you. Okay. Because we don't have a pool of caddies just sitting waiting for last minute work in your area. So generally what we do with the club is we'll partner with the club and we'll support you 365 days a year. And then when you need to surge hey, Dave, we need 20 more today. We know your schedule. We've worked with you on it in advance, and we'll have those 20 for your surge days. But if it was just, hey, we're going to call you from time to time and ask you for an extra 20 caddies, I'm not in 50 states and I'm not in every city, and I don't have 50 caddies ready to go everywhere. I'm not Uber in that sense. Yeah. We sort of have to be partnered with the club regularly to make that work for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does. Where was I going?
When I have in the DC area, we have 3 clubs that work together with us. So as a result, I've got a pretty big pool of caddies in the DC area, as an example. So when another club calls me out of the blue in DC and says, "Hey, we need 30 caddies for this Monday event," even though I don't have a contract with them, I can generally support that because we have so many caddies in the DC region.
What's the pool here in Philadelphia area?
I don't have any caddies right now in the Philadelphia area because I don't have any partners in the Philadelphia area right now.
I guess that's all. Thanks for your help.
Yep. Yeah, we always have to partner with our first club in every market in order to start building our pool. So, generally, part of the reason why I'm on this call today and partnering with the section is we've noticed that we're pretty active throughout the country, but we don't have any partners in the Philly section. So, trying to reach out to you all and develop some partnerships.
What is the pay or the fees that we would pay as a club to you guys, and what goes to the caddy? How does that payment stuff work?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So everybody does it a little bit differently, and meaning different providers. And then also, Sean, even within our customers, every club does it a little bit differently. We're flexible is what I want you to hear, but generally we're going to charge the club an annual software fee if you're using the software. And that's, again, $3,000 to $6,000 for the year. That's the fee to the club. And then if you want us to pay the caddies through our platform daily, the caddies get a daily direct deposit into their bank account for the base fee of every time they go out and loop. And then we're going to charge a $3 to $5 fee on top of that, depending on what services you want. And that generally is passed on to the member. So if let's just say your caddy was getting $100 before all in, what we'll often do is, if you want to keep it all in, it'll now be $105 to the member, and the caddy still gets $100. Or what clubs will do is they'll say, "Hey, I want to reduce the taxable footprint of my independent contractor caddy, so let's just pay the caddy $50 every time he goes out. We'll charge the member $55. CaddieNow will take its $5. The caddy will get $50, and then we'll tip. We, meaning the golfer, will tip the caddy the rest in cash to get him back up to his $100." And what that means is that I have to report for 1099 and for legal purposes. I've got to report the $50 because it's paid through our platform, and that's what we all want to do to protect everybody. But the taxable income doesn't really hit the tips as much because most of our caddies, my guess is, aren't reporting their tip income, even though we tell them to. My guess is most of these guys are not reporting that to Uncle Sam at the end of the year. So I mentioned that as that's a way I've seen some clubs get around the transition to a technology partner and a caddy partner like us, is that they'll start off by saying, "Okay, we're going to pay the caddies through you, but it'll be a smaller portion, and the members will still tip in cash to get them back up to what they normally make." Does that make sense, Sean? Yeah,
that does. So basically, we're charging the member the fee, and then how do you guys, are you just billing the $5 stuff monthly? Like, how do you get those fees to you guys?
Yeah. So generally what we're going to do with you is set it up so that it becomes a member charge every time.
Yeah.
So you'll charge your member in that scenario $55 every time he takes a caddy. And then we'll bill the club every week for that $55 times the number of caddy rounds. So we're fronting the club and the member to pay the caddy for 14 to 30 days at a time. We're paying the caddy, billing the club, and then just asking that the club pay us back, within 30 days of every invoice.
Okay.
So we're cash flowing there.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, David, thank you so much for your time this morning. I thought that was really good. And for the group, just like David mentioned, we can share this presentation with you, and I'll be sure to include the link to the video as well from this morning. So if you ever want to refer back to any of the conversations that were had, you can. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks, David.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Gene.